A vehicle just pulled into a campsite in China, parked, and grew a second floor. Not a pop-up tent bolted to the roof, not a canvas awning stretched over a frame. An entire second story, sealed in glass, rising out of the roofline until it stood taller than the vehicle itself ever looked capable of being. A balcony unfolded above the driver's cab. Inside, a working elevator carried a person from the ground floor to the new level above, the kind of elevator you'd expect in a boutique hotel, not parked on the side of a highway. This is not a concept render. This is not a digital mock-up built to generate headlines and then quietly disappear. It's a real vehicle, built by China's largest automaker, costing less than many ordinary family homes in major American cities. Today, we're breaking down exactly what this motorhome is, how it manages to fold 2 full stories of livable space into something that still drives on public roads, why it costs a fraction of what comparable luxury vehicles charge, and why engineers and designers across the entire recreational vehicle industry are treating it as a genuine turning point rather than a novelty. No dramatizing, no guessing. Just the specifications, the pricing, and the engineering as the manufacturer and independent reviewers have laid it out. If vehicles like this fascinate you, subscribe now so you don't miss the next build that redefines what's possible on 4 wheels. And a thumbs up helps the algorithm put this in front of more people who genuinely enjoy seeing it. Let's start with the vehicle itself, because the specifics matter far more than the headline. It's called the SEC Maxus Life Home V90 Villa Edition, built by CAC Motor, the largest automaker in China by production volume, a company that manufactures everything from mass-market sedans to commercial vans under a range of different brands. The Maxus division, which builds the V90 platform, is primarily known for straightforward practical commercial vehicles, the kind of dependable delivery vans and work trucks that rarely make headlines anywhere. That context matters, because it makes the Villa Edition an even stranger and more interesting departure than it would be coming from a company already known for outlandish luxury builds. In its standard configuration, the Maxus Life Home V90 is a fairly ordinary Class C motorhome priced around $70,000, a capable but unremarkable recreational vehicle built on a commercial van chassis with a few extra windows and creature comforts. The Villa Edition is a completely different animal, and understanding that distinction, an ordinary commercial platform underneath, with radical engineering layered on top, is the key to understanding why this particular build has generated so much attention since it was first revealed to the public. CAC Maxus unveiled the Villa Edition at a premiere event, showcasing it as a flagship demonstration of what the company's customization program could achieve, part showcase concept and part working prototype. That distinction is worth being precise about. This isn't a purely digital rendering with no physical vehicle behind it. A working prototype has actually been built and demonstrated with functioning hydraulics, a functioning elevator, and a functioning transformation sequence that's been captured on video and shown publicly. Whether it moves into full mass production on a fixed timeline remains an open question, but the fact that a real physical working version exists sets it apart from countless concept vehicles that never advance past a rendering on a manufacturer's press page. Now let's get into exactly how the transformation works, because the mechanics here are genuinely impressive once you understand the engineering involved. While the V90 Villa Edition is being driven, it looks like a fairly conventional, if unusually sleek, motorhome. Nothing about its road profile hints at what happens once it parks. The transformation begins with a pair of lateral slide-out sections on the ground floor, hydraulic extensions that push outward from both sides of the vehicle's body, widening the main living space considerably beyond what the vehicle's driving width would ever allow. Once fully extended, that ground floor living space expands to roughly 215 square feet, a genuinely significant amount of room for a self-contained vehicle, comparable to a small studio apartment rather than the cramped, corridor-style layout most people associate with recreational vehicles. That ground floor is configured as a living room and lounge area, a kitchen with a bar counter set up including a stove, oven, refrigerator and sink, and a bathroom, giving the vehicle everything a conventional home would need packed into a footprint that still has to be towable and drivable on ordinary roads between destinations. That alone would make for an impressive luxury motorhome. But the ground floor slide-outs are only the first stage of the transformation, and they're not what earned this vehicle the comparisons to a genuine 2-story villa. Once the ground floor is fully expanded, the roof itself begins to rise, a full hydraulic lift that raises an entire upper structure straight up out of the vehicle's body until it stands as a complete second story. This isn't a raised ceiling panel or a sleeping loft with just enough headroom to sit up in, the kind of modest pop-top expansion found on some smaller camper vans. It's a full-height, walk-around second floor, enclosed on all sides by glass panels, adding roughly another 133 square feet of usable living space, stacked directly above the ground level. Once fully deployed, the second floor is tall enough to stand comfortably inside. a detail that separates it decisively from the pop-up roof campers that have existed in various forms for decades but never managed anything close to genuine second-story living space. The glass walls enclosing that second floor aren't ordinary windows either. They use a form of switchable panoramic glazing that can be electronically tinted for privacy at the touch of a button, moving from fully transparent to opaque without any physical blinds or curtains involved. Some coverage of the vehicle has described the technology inside these panels as transparent OLED display capability, meaning the glass walls can also function as television screens when needed, turning the same surface you'd look through to watch the sunrise into an entertainment display once the sun goes down, all without any separate screen mounted anywhere in the room. Whether every single panel throughout the second floor carries that display function, or whether it's concentrated in specific sections, varies depending on which version of the build you're looking at. But the underlying concept, walls that serve as both windows and screens, depending entirely on what mode they're switched into, represents exactly the kind of architectural thinking usually reserved for high-concept building design rather than vehicle engineering. Perhaps the single most talked about detail of the entire vehicle is the elevator. Rather than a fold-down ladder or a steep, narrow staircase squeezed into whatever space happens to be left over, the V90 Villa Edition includes an actual working elevator connecting the ground floor to the second story, a compact single-person lift that operates at the push of a button. It's a genuinely unusual engineering choice, since a working elevator introduces real mechanical complexity, added weight, and points a potential failure into a vehicle that also has to survive the vibration, temperature swings, and general wear of actual road travel. But it's precisely that kind of choice, solving a straightforward problem. How do you move between two floors with the most architecturally ambitious solution available rather than the simplest one, that captures what makes this vehicle stand out from virtually everything else in the recreational vehicle space? There's also a small balcony built into the design, positioned above the driver's cab and accessible once the second floor has fully deployed. Sometimes described as a Juliet balcony given its scale, a spot where you can step outside and take in the surrounding landscape from an elevated vantage point most motorhomes simply can't offer. Combined with the panoramic glass walls of the second floor, the overall effect is a vehicle that, once parked and fully deployed, offers views in every direction from two separate elevations, a genuinely different experience from looking out through a single row of side windows at the same eye-level view every conventional RV provides. Now here's where the story gets genuinely remarkable, because all of this, the dual floor transformation, the elevator, the panoramic switchable glass, the balcony, comes at a price that undercuts almost every other vehicle in the same broad category by a staggering margin. The V90 Villa Edition carries a price of roughly 2.68 million Chinese yuan, which converts to approximately $413,000. That's a serious sum of money by any ordinary measure, but it's worth putting that figure in context against the rest of the ultra-luxury motorhome market, because that's where the real story of this vehicle actually lives. Several German-built luxury motorhomes with hydraulic garages designed to carry a supercar inside the vehicle itself carry price tags well north of $7 million once the accompanying vehicle is factored in. Austrian coach builders producing hand-assembled luxury motorhomes drawing design language from motorsport, aviation, and yacht building charge around $3 million per unit, with each vehicle taking the better part of a year to complete by hand for a single buyer. Boutique manufacturers building motorhomes with certified helicopter landing pads on the roof have priced their creations somewhere between $2.5 and $3.5 million, vehicles that, notably, were never even put on official public sale in the first place. Against that backdrop, a vehicle offering a full second story, a working elevator, and switchable panoramic glass walls for roughly $400,000 isn't just competitively priced, it's priced at a fraction, in some cases less than a sixth, of what comparable ambition costs anywhere else in the world. That price gap is exactly why this particular vehicle has generated so much attention beyond simple novelty appeal, and it connects directly to the comparison sitting right in the title of this video. A $413,000 price point puts this vehicle within striking distance of median home prices in a meaningful number of American metropolitan areas, and well below the price of a genuine luxury home in most major cities anywhere in the world. That comparison isn't just a clever marketing angle. It reflects something genuinely unusual about how this vehicle was conceived in the first place. Rather than starting from the traditional recreational vehicle design brief, how do we make a single-story box feel a little more comfortable? SAEC Maxis's design team approached the problem with an entirely different starting question, one closer to what an architect designing an actual building might ask: what would a motorhome look like if it were designed with the logic of a structure rather than the logic of a vehicle? That reframing is what produced a design built around stacking usable floors on top of each other rather than simply lengthening a single-story footprint. The same fundamental logic that shapes how architects think about building upward in dense cities rather than sprawling outward across available land. It's worth being fair and precise about the trade-offs involved in a design this ambitious, because a vehicle this complex inevitably comes with real engineering compromises that a simpler single-story motorhome doesn't have to contend with. A full hydraulic system capable of lifting an entire second story, complete with glass walls and structural framing, adds significant weight to the vehicle, weight that has to be carried and controlled, deployed. That added weight and the raised center of gravity that comes with throughout every mile of ordinary road driving, not just while the vehicle sits parked at a campsite with its transformation, riding a heavier structure higher up in the vehicle's frame, both have real implications for handling, particularly on winding mountain roads or in poor weather conditions, considerations that reviewers examining the vehicle have specifically flagged as worth weighing against the undeniable appeal of the finished, parked result. There's also the simple mechanical reality that more moving parts, hydraulic slide-outs, a rising roof structure, an elevator, switchable glass, represent more potential points of failure over the vehicle's lifetime compared to a motorhome built with a fixed single-story shell and no moving structural elements at all. None of that diminishes what the vehicle achieves, but it's worth acknowledging honestly rather than presenting a vehicle this mechanically ambitious as though it comes with zero trade-offs at all. There's also an important geographic limitation worth being upfront about. As of the vehicle's release, the Lifehome V90 Villa Edition has been sold exclusively within the Chinese domestic market, with no announced plans for international distribution. That means the roughly $400,000 price tag, while remarkable on its own terms, doesn't currently translate into an easy purchase for buyers outside China, since importing a vehicle like this into markets like the United States or the European Union would involve navigating an entirely separate set of vehicle safety, emissions, and homologation requirements that a China-only release was never designed to satisfy in the first place. For now, the vehicle functions primarily as a demonstration of engineering ambition and manufacturing capability rather than a globally available product, though that status could obviously shift if SAIC Maxus decides to pursue broader international certification down the line, something the company hasn't ruled out but also hasn't formally committed to on any announced timeline. Let's talk about why a vehicle like this matters beyond its own specifications, because there's a broader industry story unfolding here that extends well past one particularly ambitious motorhome from one particular Chinese manufacturer. For decades, the recreational vehicle industry, especially at its highest luxury tiers, has been dominated overwhelmingly by European and American manufacturers, companies steeped in generations of coach-building tradition, often drawing design inspiration and engineering talent from adjacent industries like yacht building, aviation, and high-performance motorsport. That heritage produced genuinely remarkable vehicles, but it also produced an industry where innovation tended to move incrementally, refining familiar layouts and adding incremental luxury touches, rather than fundamentally rethinking what a motorhome's basic structure could be. Chinese manufacturers entering this same space over the past several years have shown a consistent willingness to skip past that incremental refinement entirely and ask more fundamental questions instead. A separate Chinese-built motorhome, produced by a team of engineers who reportedly drove 3 prototype vehicles more than 13,000 kilometers from Sichuan province all the way to Germany, specifically to present their work at the industry's most important European trade show, made headlines for using a full carbon fiber body structure, the same class of material used in Formula One chassis construction and military aircraft, in a production vehicle priced above just $150,000. A price point where no other manufacturer anywhere in the world currently offers a carbon fiber motorhome body at all. The willingness to bring genuinely novel materials and engineering approaches into a price bracket previously considered off limits for that level of technology is part of a broader pattern showing up across multiple Chinese manufacturers simultaneously, not an isolated instance limited to a single company's marketing stunt. The V90 Villa Edition fits squarely into that same broader pattern, but pushes the underlying logic even further, from questioning what materials a motorhome should be built from to questioning the vehicle's basic structural form altogether. Once you start asking whether a motorhome can be designed like a building rather than a vehicle, an entirely different set of questions opens up that traditional coach builders, working within decades of established convention, had simply never seriously entertained. How many usable floors can realistically be packed into a vehicle that still has to comply with road width and height restrictions while driving? What building technologies, elevators, switchable smart glass, hydraulic structural lifts translate successfully from architecture into something that has to survive highway vibration and real-world weather? Those aren't questions the recreational vehicle industry was systematically asking before vehicles like the Villa Edition demonstrated they could actually be answered. and answered at a price point dramatically below what similar ambition costs when pursued by boutique European coach builders working in small production runs. It's worth being clear-eyed about how much of this shift reflects genuine manufacturing advantage versus simple market positioning, because both factors are clearly at play here, and it would be an oversimplification to credit either one alone. China's manufacturing base benefits from significantly lower labor costs and an enormous, highly developed domestic supply chain for automotive components, advantages that apply broadly across Chinese automotive manufacturing and aren't unique to the recreational vehicle sector specifically. Those structural cost advantages genuinely do allow Chinese manufacturers to bring more ambitious engineering to market at price points that would be difficult for smaller European or American coach builders working with fundamentally different cost structures and much smaller production volumes to realistically match. At the same time, SAIC itself is an enormous company, one of the largest automakers in the world by total production volume, giving it engineering and manufacturing resources that dwarf what boutique luxury coach builders, however skilled, typically have access to for a single specialty product line. Scale and cost structure both matter here, and pretending the price gap is explained by only one factor, rather than both working together, would be an incomplete account of what's actually happening. There's also a cultural and lifestyle dimension worth touching on, because the demand driving vehicles like this doesn't exist in a vacuum separate from broader consumer trends. Domestic recreational vehicle ownership and road trip culture have been growing steadily within China over the past several years, part of a broader expansion of leisure travel spending among a growing segment of financially comfortable Chinese consumers looking for new ways to spend increasing discretionary income. A vehicle explicitly marketed and designed around the concept of bringing villa-style luxury living onto the open road speaks directly to that specific audience. Buyers who want the recognizable comforts and prestige signals associated with a genuine luxury home, but paired with the freedom and novelty of being able to relocate that home to a different scenic location whenever they choose. That target audience, and the broader domestic market growth supporting it, helps explain why a vehicle this specifically ambitious made commercial sense to develop and showcase in China first, well ahead of any serious consideration of international markets, where recreational vehicle culture and consumer expectations both look meaningfully different. Stepping back from the specifics of this one vehicle, the broader pattern worth recognizing is this. The recreational vehicle industry's traditional hierarchy, built for decades around European coach building heritage and premium pricing that treated genuine architectural ambition as something reserved for buyers with seven-figure budgets, is being challenged directly by a wave of Chinese manufacturers willing to bring that same level of ambition to a completely different price bracket. Whether that ultimately reshapes the broader luxury motorhome market on a global scale, or whether vehicles like the Villa Edition remain primarily a domestic Chinese phenomenon, showcasing manufacturing capability without ever achieving wide international distribution, remains a genuinely open question that will likely take several more years and several more vehicle releases across multiple manufacturers to answer with any real confidence. What isn't in question, though, is the engineering achievement sitting at the center of this particular vehicle. A working, demonstrated motorhome that transforms from a conventional road-going profile into a genuine two-story living space, complete with a full-height glass-enclosed second floor, a functioning elevator, switchable smart glass walls doubling as entertainment screens, and a balcony offering elevated views over whatever landscape it happens to be parked beside, all for a price that undercuts comparable luxury motorhome ambition by a factor of several times over. That's not simply a clever marketing exercise or an eye-catching concept render designed to generate headlines and then quietly disappear. It's a real, physically demonstrated vehicle that's already prompted engineers and reviewers across the entire recreational vehicle industry to start asking a fundamentally different question than the one that shaped this category for decades. Not how do you make a single-story box feel more comfortable, but how many floors can you realistically stack? And what does a vehicle look like once you stop treating vehicle and building as two separate design categories altogether? There's a deeper technical story worth unpacking around the hydraulic system, because lifting an entire glass-enclosed second story straight out of a vehicle's roofline is a genuinely different engineering challenge than the slide-out expansions that have existed in the recreational vehicle industry for years. Conventional slide-outs, the horizontal extensions that widen a motorhome's interior once parked, only have to move mass sideways, supported the entire time by the vehicle's existing floor structure, a vertical lift mechanism capable of raising an entire structural framework, complete with glass panels, wiring, climate control ducting, and enough rigidity to remain stable in wind while parked, has to solve an entirely different set of engineering problems. The lifting mechanism needs enough hydraulic force to raise that mass smoothly and without excessive noise, precise enough control to stop the structure at exactly the right height and lock it there securely. and a ceiling system robust enough to keep the interior weatherproof once the structure is fully extended, since any gap in that seal would let rain, wind, or dust into a living space that's supposed to function as a genuine second floor room rather than a partially exposed platform. Getting all of that to work reliably and to keep working after repeated cycles of raising and lowering across years of ownership represents exactly the kind of engineering challenge that's kept most manufacturers from attempting anything like this, let alone at a price point accessible to buyers well outside the ultra-wealthy bracket that ordinarily commissions this level of custom vehicle engineering. The switchable glass technology used throughout the second floor deserves its own moment of attention too, because it represents a meaningful jump beyond the simple tinted or frosted glass that's been available in vehicles and buildings for years. The panels used throughout the Villa Edition's upper level rely on electrochromic or similar smart glass technology, materials that change their light transmission properties in response to an electrical charge, rather than through any mechanical shade or physical barrier. Applying that technology across large curved or angled glass panels on a vehicle that has to survive real-world vibration, temperature extremes from summer heat to winter cold, and the general wear of repeated deployment represents a genuinely more demanding application than using the same technology in a stationary building where none of those same physical stresses come into play. The addition of display capability layered directly into some of those glass panels, allowing the walls to function as screens, adds another layer of technical complexity, since it means integrating display electronics into a surface that also has to remain structurally sound, weatherproof, and capable of surviving the same vibration and temperature swings as the rest of the vehicle's glazing. It's also worth walking through how this vehicle fits into SAIC Maxxis's broader product strategy, because the Villa Edition didn't emerge in isolation from the rest of the company's vehicle lineup. The standard Lifehome V90, the more conventional, roughly $70,000 version of the platform that the Villa Edition is built from, has sold steadily within the Chinese domestic market as a capable, if relatively ordinary, Class C motorhome. That existing platform and its established production infrastructure gave SAIC Maxxis a proven foundation to build the far more ambitious Villa Edition on top of, rather than developing an entirely new vehicle architecture from scratch specifically to support the transformation mechanism. That's a meaningfully different development path than the one boutique European coach builders typically follow, where each ultra-luxury vehicle is often built essentially from the ground up as a bespoke, low-volume project. Building the Villa Edition on top of an existing, already proven production platform likely represents a significant part of why SAIC Maxxis was able to bring this level of engineering ambition to market at a fraction of what comparable custom builds cost elsewhere, since the underlying chassis, drivetrain, and much of the base vehicle engineering didn't need to be developed and validated from scratch specifically for this one flagship model. There's a broader conversation happening across the automotive press about how to properly categorize a vehicle like this, and it's worth touching on because it reflects genuine uncertainty about where products like the Villa Edition actually fit within existing industry classifications. Traditional recreational vehicle categories, the Class A, Class B, and Class C designations used throughout the industry to describe everything from massive bus-style motorhomes down to compact camper vans, were developed decades ago around vehicles with a single, fixed living space. A vehicle that transforms from something resembling a conventional Class C profile while driving into something considerably closer to a small, freestanding two-story structure once parked doesn't map cleanly onto any of those existing categories, which is part of why so much of the coverage surrounding the Villa Edition has reached for comparisons to residential architecture, villas, townhomes, small apartments, rather than comparisons to other recreational vehicles. That classification ambiguity isn't just a matter of marketing language. It reflects a genuine, unresolved question about whether vehicles built around this kind of dramatic structural transformation eventually warrant their own distinct category within the broader recreational vehicle industry, separate from the conventional classes that have organized the market for decades. It's also worth addressing directly how a vehicle like this handles the practical realities of actual travel, since a transformation this dramatic inevitably raises questions about setup time and about how quickly the vehicle can be returned to its compact road-legal configuration when it's time to move on to the next destination. Deploying and retracting a structure this complex isn't instantaneous, the way simply parking a conventional motorhome and stepping outside would be. The full transformation sequence, extending the ground floor slide-outs and then raising the entire second story into position, takes meaningfully longer than setting up a conventional single-story RV. A trade-off that buyers, considering a vehicle like this, have to weigh against the payoff of the finished, fully deployed living space once the sequence completes. For travelers planning to stay at a single location for an extended period, that setup time becomes a minor one-time consideration. For travelers hoping to relocate frequently across a shorter trip, the same setup and tear-down sequence becomes a more meaningful factor in planning each day's itinerary. Exactly the kind of practical trade-off that separates a vehicle designed primarily around spectacular parked presentation from a vehicle designed primarily around frequent, rapid relocation. Reviewers who've had direct access to the working prototype have generally been careful to frame the Villa Edition as a genuinely working demonstration rather than an overpromised concept that quietly underdelivers once you look closely at the details, a distinction that matters given how often manufacturer press events showcase impressive-looking concept vehicles that never quite live up to their initial presentation once independent journalists get real hands-on access. The consistency of that positive, hands-on assessment across multiple independent outlets that have covered the vehicle adds real credibility to the claim that this isn't simply an elaborate rendering dressed up to look more finished than it actually is. Looking ahead, the most interesting open question surrounding this vehicle isn't really about the Villa Edition itself, since its specifications, pricing, and current China-only availability are already well established and unlikely to change dramatically in the near term. The more interesting question is what happens next across the broader industry now that this level of engineering ambition has been demonstrated at this specific price point. Will established European and American luxury coach builders, watching a Chinese manufacturer undercut their pricing by a factor of several times over while matching or exceeding their engineering ambition, respond with their own dramatically reimagined designs? Or will they continue focusing on the kind of bespoke, ultra-low volume craftsmanship that's defined their segment of the market for decades, betting that buyers at the very top of the price range will continue paying a premium for hand-built exclusivity, regardless of what's now available at a fraction of the cost? While other Chinese manufacturers, having watched the attention and coverage this vehicle generated, push even further in the same direction, stacking additional floors, adding features that push even deeper into genuine architectural territory rather than conventional vehicle design. And will SAIC Maxus itself eventually pursue the kind of international certification that would let vehicles like this reach buyers outside China's domestic market? A move that could meaningfully reshape the competitive landscape for luxury recreational vehicles worldwide if it ever happens on any serious timeline. That's the full picture of what makes this Chinese motorhome such a genuine outlier. A working two-story transformation with an elevator and switchable smart glass. A price point dramatically undercutting every comparable luxury motorhome currently on the market anywhere in the world. And a broader pattern of Chinese manufacturers bringing genuinely novel engineering approaches into a category long dominated by incremental European refinement. Whether it ever reaches international buyers directly or continues to influence the broader industry indirectly through the ideas it's already demonstrated are possible. This vehicle has already done something worth paying attention to, which is proving that the question of what a motorhome is even allowed to be was never as settled as the rest of the industry had assumed. We'll keep tracking every new release in this space as more manufacturers, Chinese and otherwise, push further into this same territory. Because if the pace of the past few years is any indication, this is very much an accelerating trend rather than a one-time novelty. If you want to know the moment another manufacturer answers this same challenge with something even more ambitious, subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and let us know whether you'd actually want to live in something like this on the road, or whether a working elevator inside a motorhome crosses a line even you didn't know you had. See you in the next one.